Welcome back. Today is National Housing Day. That's a day that highlights the critical issues of housing and homelessness in this country. According to a recent Abacus data poll in partnership with the Canadian Real Estate Association, 9 in 10 Canadians are concerned about the state of housing in this country. Here in Ontario, advocates have raised issues with Bill 60, which would cut appeal timelines and shorten eviction notice periods. The province has defended the bill, saying it aims to make rental rules more flexible in order to attract more landlords to the market. For more on this, we're joined by Ricardo Tranjan, Ontario Research Director and Senior Researcher at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Thanks for joining us here live on CP24. Now, the Ford government is looking at Bill 60 as a way for them to create more housing, cut the red tape. He loves that saying. But, your group says that this could put a lot of people in very precarious and oftentimes dangerous situations.
Yes, first, the rationale for the policy doesn't hold against the evidence. I looked at the numbers myself. There's not that many vacant units out there that could be put in the market should the rules change. So what we have in the big picture is the fact that rent is increasingly unaffordable for working families. We have very low housing starts right now, residential housing construction starting right now. We also have encampments growing across the country and across the province. And of course, the winter is starting. And so, and then you get the provincial government and ask, what are we doing with fast-tracking evictions? I think it doesn't take any housing experts to think that perhaps that's not the priority.
Right. So the priority, at least for me, I'm not an expert, just from living in the cities. Yes, there's not enough housing. The housing that is available are like one-bedroom condos for speculators. So what needs to be done? They had the federal budget. Mark Carney had his first federal budget, $25 billion for housing over the next 5 years. Can we wait 5 years?
No, we can't. The positive thing about the federal budget is that the approach changed. So for about 10 years with the National Housing Strategy, we saw a lot of focus on giving private developers more incentives and hoping that some of the housing they were going to build was going to be affordable. Now we changed and said, you know what, we're going to get in there directly, the federal government, we're going to build housing in public land, we're going to build non-market housing. It's good. It's a good change in approach, but the amount of money that has been made available for this makes it so that it's more of a pilot project at this time than really a response to the crisis.
So that's the $25 billion you're talking about? Like you're thinking it probably should be more.
Yes, and it's over 5 years. A lot of the money had already been committed. A lot of the money speaks to previously approved initiatives. There's when you look at what's new money in that 25, the amount is much smaller.
And I also wonder, Toronto is it's dense, could be denser, right? But what about other parts of the country? I'm starting to see more people think about, we might have to move to Winnipeg. We might have to move to Halifax. What can be done there to try to attract people to move elsewhere?
Well, people go after jobs.
Right.
We have to work, we have to make a living, and we have to find a job that fits our skills and that provides our families what they need. So you can't just build a lot of housing in places where there's not necessarily the job market to absorb it. So I think the answer is really to make incomes and housing prices more closely associated, as they used to be, right? Some economists call it the decoupling of wages and housing costs, right? Which means essentially that the two are completely out of sync. And that's where provincial legislation can actually play a very important role, because provincial legislation is where you're going to have the opportunity to regulate rent increases and to try to slow down the pace of those housing costs so that they don't go up faster than wages, so that you're working and you can still keep up with your rent or with your mortgage. And that's, very unfortunate, in Ontario right now, we're moving in the opposite direction. Instead of regulating, we're removing rent controls, we're removing all sorts of regulation, allowing housing prices to skyrocket, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you're right. About the jobs thing, for sure. It's definitely a multi-pronged thing. You need housing, but you also need, diversity and jobs everywhere. It can't all just be, all in, basically Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal. It needs to be everywhere. But yeah, about what the province can do in terms of the direction it takes. We could go back to Bill 60, what it does, the kind of position it puts tenants in. The group says, it doesn't give them as much time to, pay back some rent that they may have missed or maybe behind. Doesn't give them as much time to figure something out, a contingency plan if they are getting evicted or even appealing that eviction. What could be done to try to not force the hand, but try to have a conversation with the government saying, hey, you already think the homelessness problem is not great. This could potentially make it worse.
Yes, there's one housing expert that calls it the Building Encampments Faster Act, because all of us who look at the data all the time, we see this bill and we say, like, we will obviously create more encampments as a result of this bill, because we know that someone who falls into arrears is already by definition in a delicate financial situation. So now we have a due process to the landlord and tenant board that should do two things. First, try to avoid eviction. Ask the person, can you come up with the money, in a month or so, and then let's make a plan to make sure that you have opportunity to pay, because we don't, as a government, the policy outcome should be we don't want you to be evicted. And the second thing is also to have a due process to make sure that the accusations, the claims brought against this tenant are factual. But right now, one of the things that strikes me as most shocking in the Bill 60 is that tenants will have to pay at least half of the amount they allegedly owned in order to be able to defend themselves. That's we don't see that anywhere else in our judicial system. Even if you have a parking ticket, you get a chance to say you didn't do it before you have to pay it. But here we're asking people to pay first in order to have the right to defend themselves. I think there's unprecedented in our judiciary system.
Wow. Yeah, and also at last check, the landlord tenant board trying to get a hearing from them is very long wait from what I understand. So that whole process as well can maybe be looked at. Okay, Ricardo, thanks so much. I do appreciate your time on this National Housing Day. Have a great rest of the weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Of course.